welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm going to be talking about some 5-star predictions. So I have been doing quarterly 5-star prediction videos for a while, and it's just kind of a fun way to pick a couple of books I think are going to be 5 stars rather than having like an annual TBR of 5 stars, because then I forget to read books or it feels like an overwhelming list. So picking a couple of the books that I'm planning to read in the next quarter and predicting them to be 5 stars is a really great way for me to do this. So in April, I posted a video with a few books that I was planning to read in the second quarter of 2024 that I thought would be 5 stars. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go over those books, talk about whether or not they were 5 stars, and then make predictions for the third quarter of 2024. So I had 3 books on my list for second quarter. The first one was Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. So this is a dark fairy tale. It was the 3rd T. Kingfisher book that I read. One of my favorite books of the year so far is another T. Kingfisher book, but this one just didn't hold up for me. There were elements to it that I really liked. I liked the fairy tale-esque elements. Loved the writing, as always. Some of the character development was there for me. Some of it just absolutely wasn't. There were some found family elements that I thought were sweet, but I wasn't very attached to the characters, so it didn't really elicit very much of an emotional response for me. And part of my issue too is that I think I read this book when I was in the middle of a reading slump, and so maybe I would have rated it a little bit higher if I'd read it when I was not in a reading slump, but I still don't think it would have been 5 stars for me. It would have been 4 at the highest, but at the time of reading it, I actually gave it 3 stars because I thought it was still good, but it definitely wasn't a 5 star. I already mentioned that I was in a reading slump. I was in a reading slump for all of April and most of May, and the next book that I predicted would be 5 stars is the one that broke me out of my reading slump in the middle of May, and that's My Antonia by Willa Cather. This is a short little book about a couple of kids who are moving to the Nebraskan prairie for different reasons, and their friendship that develops, and then it's kind of like a coming of age story as well as both of them are growing up. It's fairly episodic and not very plot heavy, but it is just so lovely. The nature writing is exquisite, which is exactly what I come to expect from a Willa Cather book. And I've learned that I don't need a plot for Willa Cather to just suck me in. I just love her so much. I think I wrote in my Goodreads review that I think she could write about paint drying and I would love it. So it absolutely was 5 stars. The last book is one that I very recently finished. I actually finished it like the very end of June, and that is Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. I had read The Overcoat, which is a short story of his last fall, and it was 5 stars because the writing was just so witty, so fun, and Dead Souls was no different in that regard. I love his writing. I think that his descriptions are so vivid and so fun and witty and immersive, but it wasn't quite 5 stars for me for a couple of reasons. So first of all, Gogol intended this to be a 3-volume work. He only completed volume 1, and then my edition has bits and pieces of volume 2 because he had written it and then burned the manuscript not once but twice as he reworked it, and he just wasn't happy with it. So volume 2 is like really disjointed, where there are parts of the narrative where it says there are pages missing here, this word's illegible, and it ends in the middle of a sentence. So I would say that reading volume 2 was not a very satisfying experience. It was all bound up in one book, but even if it hadn't been, even if it had just been volume 1, while it was super fun and I really enjoyed my time there, I don't think that it quite had the depth to push it to a 5-star read, in addition to it not feeling very conclusive because it was intended to be 3 volumes, so we don't truly find out exactly where the protagonist ends up or anything like that. So I still really loved it. I gave it 4 stars, and it's like a very high 4 stars if I'm counting volume 1 on its own. Like, the writing itself is like 5-star level writing, but I wish that it just had a little bit more to it, so it didn't quite make it. So I did not do very good with my 5-star predictions in quarter 2. Only one of the 3 ended up being 5 stars, so I'm hoping that these predictions are a little bit more on the money. 2 of the books that are my 5-star predictions are books that I am intending to read in July and 1 in September. So One of them is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is a middle grade fantasy about a girl who is born the oldest of 3 daughters, and that's considered super unlucky. She ends up being cursed by a witch to have the body of an old woman and then ends up working for this wizard at a castle, and the castle like moves around. And that's really all that I know about it. I know that it's really whimsical. I know that there's a Studio Ghibli film, and so I'm actually planning to read Howl's Moving Castle and then watch the movie and then just kind of see what I think of the two of them. I was supposed to read this book in June, but it just didn't happen, so it got pushed to July. A book that I'm reading for K-Tropathon that I think will be 5 stars is Familiar Things. So this book is written by an author that I read last year for K-Tropathon, and he wrote Princess Body, which was my favorite read for K-Tropathon last year. It didn't make it to the 5-star mark, unfortunately, because I just felt like it kind of ended really abruptly and kind of hopelessly, but it was really like the most immersive and beautiful reading experience that I'd had so far with translated Korean works. Like, I thought the prose was just incredible. And that's not always how I feel about Korean translated literature. Sometimes the prose feels a bit more stark. And I think that that's because there are just certain things that don't translate well. And I also think that the way that emotion and relationships are depicted in Asian books, both Korean and Japanese, and how they're depicted in American works are very different. Like the way that relationships and emotions are approached at all and felt by the common population, and then how they're thus written about is just like really, really different. So I feel like the more that I have become acclimated to that, the more I have enjoyed translated works. But I loved Princess Bari. It was like very fairy tale-esque North Korean defector story, and this one, I don't know a lot of the details about it. I know that it's about a poor boy who lives in a place called Flower Island where people are dumping their trash, and he's like gleaning things from the trash. And I think that there is kind of like a supernatural fairy tale like element to it, much like there was in Princess Body. So I think that that element adds a lot. It makes it feel kind of a little bit fairy tale-esque. So I'm wondering if Familiar Things will be the same way. But I really, really love this author's prose. And this was a favorite of Christy Lewis, and she and I intersect a lot in our tastes. So I'm really, really hopeful that this one will be 5 stars. And lastly, the book that I'm planning to read in September is The Blue Castle by Ellen Montgomery. I know, I'm surprised I haven't read this one too. I've read a lot of her books, and this is one of the few of her novels that I still have not read. This is one of the few also that she did not write for children. I think The Blue Castle and then A Tangled Web, I think, are the only ones that she wrote intentionally for adult audiences. So I don't know a ton about this. I know that it has to do with the main character who has a really controlling family, and her kind of exerting her own freedom and coming into herself and not being enslaved to the opinions and advice of her family anymore is kind of where I think the story goes. But a lot of people I know who have read this book, it's their favorite Ellen Montgomery book, which is so high praise to place it above the Anne books. That's just crazy to me. So I'm really, really excited to read this one. Planning to read it in September. Purposely planned it for September because it's my birthday month. And so I feel like it's going to be a happy and really enjoyable read to read in September. Well, that's it for this video. Me reviewing my 5-star predictions from the second quarter, making some new ones for the third quarter. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below if you've read any of these books. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you ever make 5-star predictions? I'm just curious because I feel like it's really fun. I'm not the kind of person who puts pressure on myself. It was like, oh, now I have to like this and now I hate it because I said I would like it. I'm not that kind of a person. I know some people are like that and they can't make 5-star predictions for that reason, and I'm totally not that person. I just think it's fun to kind of like guess what I think will be 5 stars. So I'm really hoping that I'm more successful in this quarter than I was in the second quarter, but I think that I will be because I'm not in a reading slump right now, and I spent most of the second quarter in a reading slump. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.